So everybody's heard her story by now. The other four, just throw them out the window. They're ridiculously stupid. They're outlandish. They're crazy. But this one, she sounds credible. In fact, I do believe something happened to her. However, she is not a credible witness for her story. Others that were around could corroborate or refute her, and in this case, they did refute her. So this is not something that Kavanaugh did, or Kavanaugh. I want to put a D in his name for some reason. Okay, I'll leave that alone. She brought it up when she was married to her husband. She brought it up in therapy sessions that are couples therapy, so clearly she has issues with men to begin with, or else she wouldn't be needing couples therapy. If you can't trust a man for anything, then your relationships are going to suck. Trust is the foundational element for all relationships. I digress. Years later, 36 years later, she's claiming that this person is the person that assaulted her. But what happened between those 36 years? Did she not try to figure out who did it, who done it? Did she not claim somebody else during that time? Like, all we're hearing is that this one person did it. On his side, he had documented evidence. He kept a journal that pretty much demonstrates that he didn't do it. None of the witnesses corroborated her story either. So this is why she wasn't credible as a witness to her own assault. It's sad, but it is true. So let's leave all that evidence to the side for now. She's a doctor in psychology. Let's start there. In doctorates of psychology, she should know that at least she should have touched on things like trauma, memory, the ability to remember things, being in a traumatic event. She should understand these things. And if she doesn't understand them, then she wasn't paying attention in class, because I am not a doctor of psychology. My doctorate is in management and organizational leadership. However, I study influence. I study the way two people can interact, and one of those people is going to be a leader out of the two, and then you get something done, basically. Or you get one person that can get a group to get things done. There's whole things about motivation and all that fun stuff. That's my field, right? Well, the literature when it comes to memory and trauma is definitive here, and allow me to demonstrate what I'm talking about. So as you can see here, trauma, PSD is kind of there's a causal link. When trauma happens, you have post-traumatic stress disorder sometimes, where you freak the hell out. I've seen it firsthand. It's pretty horrific what these people have to go through. Sometimes a friend of mine decided to come over and get drunk once, and in drinking he lost his ability to control his memories and thoughts, and he went crazy, unfortunately. It was very sad to see. Anyways, I've seen it firsthand, and these people that have post-traumatic stress disorder, they need a way to work it out. But the problem is your memory is not exactly trustworthy when you have these horrific events. So I wanted to go over this because it's going to demonstrate why she is not credible to her own story, and why the Democrats that kept on saying she's very credible and she's very trustworthy were pretty much doing that to enforce their own mob mentality and have no idea what they're talking about. They just believe her because she's testifying against the person they don't want. That's really what it was. They're not incredibly stupid, but they are a collectivist thought. So you look at her story and you think there's some merit to her story. I mean, it sounds like something bad happened. She recalls not necessarily the place, which I have issue with, but she can't recall the date. That's normal. Not surprised. But she can recall the specifics of what happened. And it doesn't sound like she fabricated any of that to me. And I can understand where she's coming from, but at this point, I think she has confused one person with another. There's even been in this story that two people have come forward saying that they're the ones that she's talking about. I don't know why you'd want to admit to something like that, but maybe because they're Republican, maybe because they're sick of this bullshit, and they're like, no, this was me, and I'm sorry, or some shit. Maybe that's what they're doing. I don't want to guess what their motives were, but it was clearly not him. I mean, there was... Anyways, we're digressing here. She's definitely feminist. She's definitely allianced with the women's movement and all that kind of fun stuff. And this stuff was very traumatic. She has clear bias and stereotypes. And when you have all that stuff, you can just swap a person in your memory. It's normal, unfortunately, for traumatic events. They begin to see everyone as their assailant. It's very possible she was assaulted. And I don't think she made this up. But it wasn't Kavanaugh who did it. And it's clear to me why. So let's go over this particular article from Psychology Today from Nathan Lentz, PhD, and he goes under beastly behavior. It's kind of funny to me, but whatever. I just wanted to outline some of the things that he says in here. So, memories are not perfect reconstructions. Instead, remembering a past event is a combination of process of putting pieces together, separate details, making inferences to fill in gaps to create a whole coherent memory. Normally, these inferential processes serve us well. However, it's not 100% accurate. Our current drives, biases, stereotypes, expectations can all affect inferential processes, fundamentally distorting what we remember. While it might not be easy to accept, our memories for mundane experiences can be distorted in such ways. People have long clung to the notion that traumatic memories are different, that they are protected from any kind of memory distortion. That is not true. We have converging evidence that demonstrates that experiences of trauma, whether a single event such as a sexual assault or a sustained stressful experience, might involve multiple trauma types, experiences of war, are vulnerable to memory distortion. In fact, traumatic memory distortion appears to follow a particular pattern. People tend to remember experiencing even more trauma than they actually did. Usually this translates to a greater severity of post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms over time. Remembering the trauma grows, for example. So I wanted to point out this particular to the veterans, and I'm going to go over this next paragraph, and this pretty much outlines the study of psychology, and this is forensic psychology, saying that when you do these things and you have a traumatic event, it expands, and that's how you get PTSD. So those stupid assholes claiming they got PTSD from Twitter can fuck right off, because if they don't like mean words on the internet, they shouldn't be on the internet, because that's really all it is. It's not trauma. If your fragile brain can't handle criticism, you're in the wrong place. But anyways, I digress from that as well. Simply put, over-remembering trauma usually leads to poor mental health outcomes. In one example, Southwick et al. Asked Desert Storm veterans at 1 month and 2 years from return of service whether certain events occurred during that service. Sniper fire, sitting and dying with a colleague, so on and so forth. They found that 88% of veterans changed their responses to at least one event, and 61% changed more than one. Importantly, the majority of those changes were from "no, that did not happen to me" to "yes, that did happen to me." Not surprisingly, over-remembering was associated with an increase in PTSD symptoms. So from an evolutionary perspective, it would not seem adapted to remember events more traumatic over time that would increase emotional pain and crippling symptoms in PTSD, thus delaying recovery. However, I disagree with that, because from a evolutionary perspective, if you went through a traumatic event and survived, say you were being chased down by a bear or some shit back in your caveman days, over-remembering it would help you, it would make you more fearful of going into a certain situation because you know that this happened once and you don't want it to happen again. So you completely avoid that situation not to die. Just a thought. Traumatic events may actually increase survivability. It's my opinion, I guess. So the article goes on, and I'll link it in my description. As you can see, it's very lengthy. But this Professor Nathan Lentz, molecular biology at Jay College, has a very, very salient point. Memory, when it comes to traumatic events, can distort, can take up inference from your biases, can adjust over time. And the fact that she's biased against Republicans is probably why she said, oh, that's the guy that tried to rape me. It's a very traumatic event. And I wanted to illustrate how traumatic it is as well, to kind of give you a demonstration of how somebody's mind can be distorted from what did occur and what didn't occur. And it usually takes corroboration for somebody that's not been through the traumatic event, but you told initially, that might solidify the things that happened to you. So I'm going to reference a couple people in my life that have had a traumatic event. I'm going to start with my sister, because she's had an attempted rape in our home. Just so happened I was living at home at the time, and my sister was still in high school, I believe. I don't remember the exact date or time, to be honest. But I remember what I was doing. I went out with friends that night to have a particular experience. I'm not going to get into it. Let's just say that. But I'm doing that in case the person watching this, because I still talk to him, watches this. And he's a sensitive person. Let's put it that way. I don't want them to think that this was their fault. So we had a very traumatic event that happened. Basically, I went out that night. My parents went out to a place called Wendover, where it's a border town for people in Utah that want to gamble. They'll go to that border town because it's Nevada. And they went out to gamble. I was gone from home, so she was home alone. Well, a person broke into our house, tried to pin down my sister, and tried to rape her. I happen to know that this happened because I saw the aftermath. I saw the broken window. And I saw my sister. She knows that what had happened and who did it, because we were able to identify this person. She knows this person was Hispanic, and she's had a slight prejudice toward Hispanic people because of it. Not all of them, but she will not date an Hispanic person. Let's just put it that way. The ones that have been friendly to her, she's friendly back. She tries not to be biased, but this kind of thing will distort your biases. Unfortunate, but true. And the reason why she can remember is because she was smart and remembered my lesson to her, that she should always pack a weapon. And she happened to always keep a knife in her cleavage area in her bra. I hate to put it that way. But basically, the guy tried to pin her down in that, and she reached into her cleavage, flipped out the knife, and stabbed him in the chest. He was able to get back, but it went through his shoulder. And we told the cops. We told the police. We told them that she stabbed him. They found him and picked his ass up within 48 hours because we also saw him at the club that we went and frequently attended. He happened to show up. The bouncer's a cop. End of story. He went to jail. And he was also deported because he's an illegal immigrant as well. Just throwing that one out there. They kicked his ass out of the country for attempted rape. He's probably back by now. I wouldn't doubt it, because if he got here once illegally, it's not going to stop him from jumping the border again. He knows how to do it. So, why would you remember the date? No traumatic person is going to remember the day that they did this unless it's associated with another day. For example, my sister doesn't remember what day it was. We know it was at night. I don't remember what day it was. We know it was on a weekend because my parents only went to Windover on the weekends. We know it was during the summer because she was still in high school, but we don't know what day. She doesn't know what day. She remembers all of that, though. The only way you'd remember a day is if you were out with your family or friends that day on a birthday, or maybe it's a holiday of some sort, and you will remember it then in that particular fashion. You might even remember the year because of it. Remember that it's in the 90s or late 90s when this happened. My son wasn't born yet, so it had to be before 98. So you'll remember location if this location is significant to you. You won't forget the location because it's a physical place that you can revisit. It won't be negated. So I'm not surprised that she remembers what house it was at and whose house it was at. Although in her testimony to Congress, she kind of flubbed on that a little bit, so it made me suspicious. But if you went to a lot of parties over very multiple people's houses all the time, you may get them confused. So I can kind of understand that because there was a lot of different parties that we went to, and I don't remember all of what happened at every place, right? But traumatic events you tend never to forget. They would remember the person that did it and the details if there was some way to tie those down to location or any other memory. The fact that my sister stabbed this person helps her remember. The fact that we know who stabbed and we know who got arrested helps us remember who did it. In her case, it was a random dude. And she says it was Brett from 36 years ago. Not likely. I think this is where her memory distortion comes into play. It would be very easy at that point to supplant something else or someone else at that point. And obviously, here's the kicker. Her witnesses say that it wasn't him. He was never there. They never knew him. Well, in our case, in my sister's case, this guy lived across the street from us. I've seen him multiple times. He was living in a house that had been kind of rotating. Like, we had drug dealers in there at one point in time, and then they moved in. And then they moved out after this. Because I'm not going to speculate, but you get my point. This all seems to corroborate that she probably did have something bad happen to her, and maybe that's why she has trust issues in her relationship and getting couples therapy, but it clearly was not this person because she can't even remember other certain details of who was at the party and when, what, around what time. If it was the summer, she was 15, so clearly she was waiting for, summer to be over so she can go get her driver's license. You remember that kind of details. That's fine. But in this case, it's easy to supplant memories of people if you don't have a definitive person to tie it to. It all depends on traumatic event. And as you can see within trauma and PTSD and memory distortion, it's evolutionary kind of in a way. And you could see every male as your attacker at that point if you don't remember exactly who did it and you did not seek justice to get it done. You just tried to drop it, run it away from it. This is why every actual victim of sexual assault, should immediately report what happened and immediately go to the cops and immediately put that person behind bars because they're immediately a piece of shit. It is what it is. But if you let it linger and you let it slide and let it get away, this kind of thing happens. It's tragic. It's horrible. And basically what you end up doing in this case is you drag somebody's face through the mud on mistaken identity, unfortunately. I really hope actually that Dr. Ford actually watches this one. She won't. She doesn't seem like the one that would be on the YouTube. But it is what it is. I mean, what are you going to do? She clearly doesn't remember the events the way they were. And that's a problem. Because now we have a mob mentality of social justice on our hands who will take up a story like that and roll with it and say, yeah, no, you're credible, when upon further reflection, it isn't. That's all I have for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. This one's a little bit more serious, and I thought I'd go into some of the science behind why she's wrong. Something did happen to her, but it wasn't this person. And yeah, thank you.
The class is finished today.